All right, YouTube. Senator Cruz has introduced the idea of a constitutional amendment for Senate and House term limits. Essentially, senators would be limited to 2 terms. People within the House to 3. I believe House terms are shorter anyway, so that just sort of makes sense to give them that extra term. I rise in strong support of this, and I say that with 2 things in mind. First, I don't like Ted Cruz. I've made that clear. I'm not going to start liking Ted Cruz because he's grandstanding here. And secondly, I do believe he's grandstanding. He has to know. He's not dumb. He's cringy. He's awkward, but he's not dumb. He realizes that the odds, even with Republican majorities in the House and Senate and a Republican president, Republicans holding most of the states, he can't possibly believe that the likelihood is there of a constitutional amendment for this, because a lot of the people that would be voting for it would be destroying their own jobs in the process. Ultimately, a lot of those people, unless they can get a really good severance package from their corporate backers, they're not going to vote for it. We should have congressional term limits. It's kind of obvious. You probably, if you polled the public, I can't even imagine what a massive supermajority of the population would support a bill like this. A massive proportion of Americans would like to see senators and people in the House limited to a certain number of terms. 2 and 3, that sounds pretty fair. You could go more draconian. You could say, oh, well, they only get 1 term apiece. Another thing I'd like to see is cut their pensions. No, they shouldn't be getting any money from people within their state or at the federal level. They shouldn't get so much as a penny when they leave. Their pay should also be capped. Make it like twice median income or something like that. You got to realize these people get all sorts of other freebies on the side. They get all sorts of free travel and free lodging and free food and everything else under the sun. They make out like bandits. They get the chauffeur and the congressional apartments and all that crap, congressional suites. They don't really have much in the way of living expenses when they're actually in office. They get these huge pensions. They get these, in many cases, enormous salaries, some states higher than others. I think John McCain, what does he get, like $1 million a year or some insane total like that? What does he do? He just sits there, half the time doesn't show up, rambles for a few hours and leaves. That's all he's good for. I'm surprised he even got reelected. So I would support this strongly. But you've got to realize getting a constitutional amendment through is not the same as getting a simple law through. The Republicans right now, for instance, could easily overthrow Obamacare. They could gut it completely tomorrow if they really wanted to. Or not, tomorrow technically, but after January 20th. It would be simple. That would actually be far, far more simple than passing a constitutional amendment. Because then you have to have the states involved as well. I believe it's, isn't it 2/3 within the House and Senate as well as 2/3 of states? Or something along those lines? I know it's not a simple majority. It's not, one extra senator and 1 extra House member joined in and decided to go in favor of this, therefore it passes. It's not quite that simple. It's a much more convoluted process, and it's made that way for a reason. It's supposed to protect the Constitution from meddling, specifically along partisan or similar ideological lines, and it works fairly well. Oddly enough, though, you look back at the past, we've had constitutional amendments that were retarded, like we had prohibition, and then it got struck down. It needed another constitutional amendment to get rid of it. I would support term limits for Congress. 2 and 3 is fair. Even if you're keeping their pensions, even if you continue to overpay them, we could get rid of half the bums in Congress right now by passing this. If this goes through, it's possible, it's remote. Ted Cruz has to know it's remote. But if, by some miracle, it does get through, if by some miracle we gain a constitutional amendment preventing them from sitting there forever on their asses, essentially snoring away like Strom Thurmond or something like that, then it would be a great thing for this nation. We could throw a lot of the people that are out of Congress now. That would be great, number 1. Number 2, it would prevent people from just continuously sitting in the legislature getting all of those constant infusions of cash while doing absolutely nothing. Number 2, you wouldn't have Bernie Sanders, senator for life, congressman for life. You wouldn't have Strom Thurmond. You wouldn't have John McCain. You wouldn't have a lot of these idiots. Most of them would be gone. A person would, presumably, they could take terms in the Senate and then they could run for a House seat, they could switch it up, that's fine. At least they're in a different position with a different capacity. You know, somebody, then they could go back, maybe run for governor or run for mayor of their hometown or something. I have no problem with that. If someone wants to be a career politician, this isn't going to hamper them from doing it. It just means that they can't sit in the same position over and over and assume that they're automatically going to have the incumbent's advantage, because incumbents are overwhelmingly reelected unless they do an absolutely terrible job. Especially within the House and Senate. People keep voting their House members and senators back in, even though something like, 20% of Americans approve of Congress, or less than that? And I'm not surprised, because a lot of these people don't feel, they feel they have a seat for life. They don't feel compelled to work with others. They don't feel compelled to be honest. They don't feel compelled to do really much of anything other than screw us more in the wallet and in the ass at the same time. It's what a lot of these people are there for. They're idiots. Yes, there should be term limits, but I'd give less than a 10% chance that it actually goes through. And that's probably under an optimistic scenario. I think Ted Cruz probably is doing this to further his career, to see more an advocate for limited government and liberties, setting himself up for a future, maybe presidential run or re-election in the Senate or something like that. That's what he's setting up for. Now, Ted Cruz is still not eligible to serve as the President of the United States, by the way. He was not born in the United States. He was born in Canada. I don't even like him on an ideological basis. I think he's a Bible-thumping nut who just happens to occasionally have a good idea. He abandoned Rand Paul when it came to the NSA in order to slap a Band-Aid on a gaping wound, as I say. He will probably abandon this. But at the same time, it's still a fundamentally good idea. There's no fault in the idea of term limits. Who can find fault with that? Who here thinks that people should be able to perpetually run for any given office in the land? I don't. I think that's crazy talk, because the people of a state will keep cementing that person back in, even if they're not doing a good job in many cases. And you get congressional redistricting and all this crap that goes on, honestly, on a constant basis. Democrats like to talk about gerrymandering. Then you look at the Chicago area. Oh, I wonder what happened there. I wonder which party was involved with this. Those evil Republicans trying to give more votes to the Democrats. My God. So, yeah, a little bit of an opinion about that. Good idea. Probably doomed. Shouldn't be. It should be a no-brainer. Should have the support of everybody in the House and Congress, because people should be whipped up into a frenzy calling them and emailing them right now to get it going. Unfortunately, right now, we're sort of in that we just ate too much turkey period, and people are kind of sleepy, or they're just perpetually outraged, and they'd never support it because it happens to be coming from Ted Cruz rather than from a Democrat. There are a lot of people in this country who won't, even if they ideologically agree with it, they won't support it if it comes from the other party because they're bitter partisans. That's another big stumbling block to getting something like this passed under the current sort of political ethos most people have within this country. It's rather unfortunate. It stalls out progress, but that's sort of just the way that it works. It's really a hindrance to our republic, so to speak. That's about all. Peace out.